This is the Flipping Junkie Podcast, Episode 9. Welcome to the Flipping Junkie Podcast. My name is Danny Johnson, former software developer turned house flipper, flipping hundreds of houses. Each week, we bring you interviews, strategies, stories, and motivation to help you get started flipping houses and on your way to becoming your own boss and achieving financial freedom. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's get to it. My guest today is Seth Williams. I've known Seth for a couple years, and I'm super pumped to have him on the show. He's an experienced land investor, residential income property owner, and commercial real estate banker. He's also the founder of retipster.com, which is a great blog that focuses on helping part-time real estate investors. And as we spoke in this interview about buying and selling vacant land, it occurred to me that most of what was talked about relates completely to flipping houses. And you might actually even be able to learn something new because it's taught from a different perspective in this episode. So I thought it was really cool. And a very interesting part of the show is also when he mentions that most of the people that buy lots from him don't even plan on building, which I thought was crazy. So, you can find out what that's all about. And he also gives some great tips on how to sell lots for long-term income. So it's a great way to set yourself up for some long-term income. And we also took a minute to discuss 3 things that we love and then 3 things that we despise about real estate investing. A lot of you will probably find that pretty interesting. And Seth also agreed to provide an example of the postcard he sends out to get leads. So you can download that from the show notes page at flippingjunkie.com/9. That's the number 9, flippingjunkie.com/9 for the show notes and to get that example of the postcard. Now get ready to take some notes because today's episode is full of great tips. Enjoy the show. All right, today I've got my good friend Seth on the show. Really glad he could make it. His name is Seth Williams. He's an experienced land investor, residential income property owner, and commercial real estate banker. He's also the founder of retipster.com. That's a real estate investing blog providing real-world guidance for part-time real estate investors. How's it going, Seth?
It's going good, Danny. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
You want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you got into investing. And I like to also have people add, not just how you got into it, but what got you interested in it.
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of all started sort of the way it does for a lot of real estate investors. Just reading books on the subject, kind of started with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, as it does for a lot of people. And it just really sort of started to resonate. And I kind of realized, man, there's something here. Like, this could be really cool. And that was back when I was in college. And what I found when I started actually, getting into that and trying to find good deals out there was that it was really, really hard. It was like 2005, 2006 at the time. And, prices were just nuts everywhere. And I could never find a deal that would make sense. And that was, it was around that time, a couple of years later, when I discovered land investing. And that's kind of what I've been focusing on ever since then. And land, I found, was a little bit different in a way that wouldn't really occur to a lot of people because it's just a much simpler animal than houses and buildings and that kind of thing because it's just dirt. There's really not much to it. And there are actually ways to buy land for prices that are just like crazy cheap, like just ridiculous. And the way that I have always done that is by contacting people who are delinquent on their taxes and just sending them, offers that would be laughable to most people. But a lot of people, when they're delinquent on their taxes, it means for one reason or another, they don't want their property. They either can't afford it or it's just a nuisance in their life. And it's just a really good opportunity to get in there and offer people an easy button. And a lot of people will accept these. And, land is not something that a ton of people are out there trying to buy, but when you can buy it at the right price, basically next to nothing, it's really not hard to turn that around and sell it for, a decent markup. And it's still, the selling price is still probably well below full market value. But the fact that I got in there so cheap meant it was just really easy to find that profit margin and make money on it. So land has just been a really cool investment that I've enjoyed a lot. And that's kind of what I've tried to direct most of my attention and effort to.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, and I over in the past, I remember there's times, and I think I've flipped one or two lots before,
Cool.
and it just happened sort of, because we maybe bought a house and there was a vacant lot next door to it,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was like, well, I'll send a letter out to those owners of that lot and see what I can do, and then we ended up doing a deal and turning around selling it. But I think the part that where you said, if people have delinquent taxes, that's an incredible idea, because really that lot's not generating any income for those people, and
Yeah.
it's just doing nothing but costing them money.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just kind of like a thorn in their side. And it's not like it's difficult to take care of a piece of vacant land. I mean, you can just sort of walk away from it and not worry about it. But I think what bothers a lot of people is, they're paying this tax bill once or twice a year, and they're just like, "But why am I doing this? Like, I'm just throwing money away." And
Yeah.
honestly, if they're not using it, they kind of are. So it's like, how can we stop that bleeding? It's like the answer is, I'll offer you a few $100 or a few $1,000 or, whatever a good deal is to me. And, don't get me wrong. A lot of people say no and they're like, get lost. But, there's still, like, I'd say the acceptance rate is probably one out of every eight, maybe one out of every dozen offers or so that I send, people will accept that. And so, I mean, it takes some time to find those people, but I mean, it's all worth it in the end. When you get that accepted offer for that incredible price, it's just like, man, that is amazing.
Wow. Yeah. So how do you, you said you look for people with delinquent taxes. How do you do that?
Yeah, it's just a matter of getting a hold of the county treasurer or tax collector, and really every treasurer in the country has this list. Whether or not they're willing to give it to you is another story, but it's just a matter of contacting them and saying, look, I need a list of all the people in your county that are currently delinquent on their property taxes. And, some counties are very open with that, and others are like, no, we're not going to do it. And it can be kind of a frustrating process in the very beginning, finding the counties that will or won't make the process easy for you. I think I've worked with about 30 counties in my state, and probably 8 to 10 of them are really good to work with. The rest of them are just, for one reason or another, they're just kind of a hassle, and I don't bother with them. So, I mean, it really does take some homework and just doing to find the right sources for that list. But
So they're not all online then.
no, it's actually, I think some counties may have that online, but it's not in the kind of format that's easy to work with. What we're looking for is an actual like Excel file listing all of these people as of, a certain point in time, because that list is changing literally every day as people do or don't pay their taxes and get on that list. So it's a list that they have to generate that day and send to you, and you have to use the information relatively soon. You can't just sit on it because that list is always changing. So once you get it, you kind of have to act on it pretty quick. But yeah, it's just a list. You can call the treasurer and ask for it, and yeah, some of them will be happy to give it to you. And it usually does cost money. I've seen the price range. The cheapest I've seen is, I guess, free. Sometimes
Yeah.
you can get it for like a penny a parcel, but the most common price I see is about 25 cents per parcel. So, I mean, some of these lists can get pretty expensive, and you kind of have to keep that in mind too when considering whether or not you want to do that.
Right. It sounds pretty cheap to me though for good leads like that. And
Yeah.
some people, when they hear you say things like, well, you've got to call, because most of them aren't online
Hmm.
and some of them are a hassle to work with. And some people might hear that and say, oh, that sounds like it's difficult. But when I hear that, I think that sounds difficult to most people, so they're not going to do it.
Absolutely.
And so if you put the work in, you just like severely limited competition with it, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and that's another really cool thing about the land niche is I don't know if it's because of how I'm finding the leads or if it's because it's land, or maybe it's both. But like I have never encountered a competitor ever in this business. Like when I find somebody and I send them the offer, like there's nobody else I'm fighting with. It's just me. So if people do say no, it's like okay, good luck. I mean, nobody else is pounding on your door. So
Yeah, and I think it's something that's not really taught often and that's probably a reason. So like my question is sort of how do you analyze these deals? I mean, it's not like this typical deal where you're going to find on the MLS a bunch of lots that sold
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
for comps. So how do you do this analysis?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's actually one of the biggest challenges I think of the business because the comps aren't there a lot of times, and the way you have to find this information and get comfortable with, your idea of the supposed market value, it's not a straightforward thing at all. What usually end up doing is I kind of go to a few different sources. I'll get on a website like Zillow or Redfin and just find other similar size lots in similar locations, and I just look for what they're listed for, not necessarily what they sold for. And the listing price certainly is not what it's going to sell for, but it tells me what my competition is. And
Oh yeah.
like these are the properties that I have to look better than in order to get noticed. And that's just a good thing to be educated about. And another way you can do it, it's a little bit more time consuming, but you can actually call up, two or three realtors in that area who also have land listed for sale and just not necessarily trusting their word as the gospel truth, but just kind of getting their take on it, saying, here's the property, if I were to list this with you today, if I wanted this to sell in 6 months, how much do you think it would sell for? And you sort of get that input from a few different people. And sometimes you'll get, varying answers. Sometimes they'll be wildly different. Sometimes they'll all kind of be in line, but it at least will give you something to go on other than just your gut. Because a lot of times, the properties that I'm buying, they're not necessarily in the city or the county where I live. So I don't know these markets that well. And it's really good to get the input of people who are in there every day working in those markets.
Yeah, no, that's really smart. And I think even for people looking to flip houses, that's a good way to get ideas of what houses are going to sell for exactly the same way.
Yeah.
You're not just talking with other agents and then other investors and stuff like that. But so so do you also sort of offer, I mean, a certain percentage of what you think you're going to sell it for?
Yeah, and again, this is part of why it's tricky, but whenever I kind of establish my theoretical number for that property's market value, I'm usually I've actually got a spreadsheet where I have different scenarios based on how motivated I think that seller is. But in one scenario, I'll offer, 10% of market value. At the most, I would offer 40%, but I usually don't go that high. Usually it's somewhere in the, 10 to 20% range. And don't get me wrong, a lot of people say no. It's not like I'm just pulling in deals left and right because I've sent them an offer. It takes some patience and some doing, and it's really kind of just a numbers game. I mean, you will get those yeses. It's just a matter of sticking to it until they come.
Oh yeah. So do you do follow up where you hit people with letters or postcards? And do you use letters and postcards? And how many times do you mail to each person?
Yeah, I do. I do use postcards. I've used letters as well, but postcards has kind of been what I've stuck to for the most part because they're cheaper and I kind of think they're easier to convey the message without somebody throwing it away before they open it. I don't know that that's necessarily the best way, but that's just kind of how I've done it. And yeah, I actually do not hit them repeatedly like that. I know I've heard of a lot of people who do that, but the thing with delinquent taxes is that that's something that's changing all the time. And a lot of times when I'm contacting these people, they only have like a couple of months until their property is seized by the county. And if they don't sell it to me, they're losing everything. So it just doesn't make sense to just hit them again and again and again because the problem is not going to be relevant 6 months from now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just hitting them once and that's it.
Wow. Do you have any idea of what the sort of the rate of calls that you get per how many that you send out with postcards?
Yeah, it's the high end would be like 25-ish%.
Wow.
And that is like the best case scenario. I don't think I've ever seen higher than that. The more typical response rate would be maybe like 10-ish%. I don't almost never see it lower than 5%.
Wow, that's really good.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I mean, I think a lot of things can have an impact, but I think the real power is in the list. I mean, getting the right data that's accurate, and not only that, but also filtering that list and getting rid of a lot of the junk leads that are not likely to call you back or do business with you. And if it can be very it can really just sort of test your patience because it's stuff that can take a lot of time and effort to do on the front end. But man, it totally pays off if you're willing to take the time to do that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's so many people don't want to take the time to scrub lists.
Yeah.
But man, like you just looked at your response rate. If you didn't scrub lists and stuff like that, I'm sure it'd probably be at least half of what you're getting.
Yeah.
Or maybe even, a little bit better. But yeah, so the list has so much to do with it because, especially when you're targeting houses and you have more competition, and then the lists are being used by so many other people.
Yeah.
To narrow down who you're mailing to based on motivation or likelihood of motivation.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a smart way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've had, experiences in the past where maybe I got the list from a place that did not have the best data, and it is not fun. Like, it is not fun to send out, 500 postcards and you get maybe 5 responses from that, and all of them want full market value. And it's just like, it just kind of like crushes your spirit in a way. It's like, man, this is horrible. And I've only made that mistake like once or twice ever because it was like so painful. I'm like, okay, I am never doing that again.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you mind sharing what your postcard has on it in a general sense or as specific as you want to be with it?
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually got a blog post that kind of lays that stuff out, but
we can put that in the show notes if you want to send me a link to it.
Yeah, absolutely. The blog post is actually called $1 Million Postcard Templates That Work. And it's there's 3 templates that I've used, and they've all worked. And I think it's because really, honestly, the power is mostly in that list. But saying something that gets noticed also is very helpful. And the template that I've used most often is just kind of like a personal note to people, and it's used on a very like a courier type font, like a typewriter, and it's not flashy at all. It's just like a couple paragraphs and just saying, hey, I saw you had this property in this county and didn't know if you're interested in selling it. And if you are, I'm looking for land in that same area and I'm interested in buying. Give me a call at this number or visit my website here. And that's pretty much all there is to it.
Wow, so many people want to make that so much more complicated than it needs to be, right?
Yeah.
With what the message should be on the postcards. If there's motivation, as long as they can determine what you're trying to tell them pretty quickly and has a call to action for what you want them to do, it should work pretty well. Do you mind, could you also send me that postcard and I can put it up to where people can maybe download an image of it or something from the show notes?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we'll also link to that post too for more information on it.
You bet.
But and so the other thing I wanted to ask was, so you do the postcards, and then how are you selling these? What's your exit strategy for these the land that you buy?
Well, I guess in the beginning, I was trying to just sell for cash just to get my money back so I could do it all over again. A couple of years into it, or maybe even as soon as a year into it, I started trying to sell these with seller financing, and I found that was actually like really, really effective in terms of getting it sold quicker and selling it for a higher price and making more money in the end and getting passive income along the way. So in a lot of ways, it's a really powerful tool if you're willing to go through the hassle of that. The only downside is you don't get all your money immediately, but if you have enough to operate on, you really don't need it. And it's great to develop those sources of income. These days, I'm actually trying to get my cash back again now so I can plug it into other things like, long-term rental properties and that kind of thing. So these days I'm opting more to sell for cash, but if I ever have issues selling a property or can't find a buyer immediately, doing the seller financing thing is hugely helpful just in terms of opening the door for a lot more people who can essentially afford to buy my property when they otherwise couldn't. So.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah.
So what with the owner financing of these lots, what kind of, can you give us an example of sort of the numbers for buying maybe one? I know it probably varies depending on where it's at and all that kind of stuff, But maybe just a rough idea of an example of what you're buying one for, then what you owner finance it for, and the terms
Yeah.
of the sale when you're selling it with owner financing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of an example. A lot of the ones that I did in the early years were, on the cheaper end, so they weren't huge dollars. But like for example, one I think I sold for like $8,000, and I only had like maybe $1,000 invested in that in the first place. So the down payment I got was somewhere in the range of like 500 ish, and then the first few payments after that basically covered everything I had invested in the property.
Wow.
And I believe that was a 5 year term on that land contract. And really every payment thereafter was just pure profit. And again, it was land and it was effectively somebody else's. So it's like I didn't, lose any sleep worrying about what was happening to it or anything like that. So it was a very, very simple thing. And yeah,
What kind of interest rate do you typically charge when you sell the lots?
9.99%.
Nice, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and it's kind of a funny thing. Um, there's a lot you can do to play with that when you're advertising it and selling it to people. In your actual closing documents, I think you just have to disclose all that. But some people will be like, 9.99%, that's horrible. And I guess the first thing to keep in mind is, with land anyway, most banks are never going to lend on just vacant land unless you have an immediate plan to develop that. So it's like most banks aren't even going to talk to you on that. But then also, like, I don't really advertise the rate in the actual listing. I just say this is what the
The
payment's
price
going to
per
be.
month,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And people are just looking at that as like, yeah, I can afford that. That makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's all they really care about.
yeah.
And actually, when you told me 9.99%, I was thinking it was actually kind of low.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, because you're offering owner financing. I mean, these people can have not so stellar credit, and it's something that a bank is not likely to lend on anyway.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's like you said, if you market it with and anytime you do anything like that with rentals or owner finance, you tell people what it's going to cost them per month because that's what they really care about.
Hmm.
And that's how they determine whether they can afford it or not, is how much they're going to have to spend each month. But if you think about interest rates back, I guess it was maybe back in the 80s, huh?
Yeah.
I don't know. We're not.
I've heard the stories.
I don't think either of us are really that old, but
Yeah.
they were what, up at 18% and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're just so used to them being so low for so long lately
Hmm.
that it seems like a lot whenever you hear something being 10%.
Yeah. And there's also, another thing with seller financing is you can play with the price a lot too. You can kind of, either charge a higher rate or a lower rate and a higher price. But again, the payment and the affordability of that is what most people are primarily concerned with.
And so what do you typically find your buyers wanting to do with these lots? Do you have builders that buy lots from you, or is it just people, neighbors maybe buying lots to make their own lot bigger? What do you find is typically the case?
Yeah, there can be all kinds of different reasons. I've actually found, surprisingly, as I look back on it, a lot of the people I sell these to are not necessarily looking to build on it. They sort of want like a retreat, like a home away from home, and it just kind of sounds cool to own land out in the country. And I don't know why, but it's not, their intent is not to buy this thing and build their primary residence on it. Maybe that's happened, but if it has, I haven't really been made aware of that. So yeah, it's mostly just people who kind of want a piece of property away from home.
So most of these, you buy inside of the city limits in a lot of places, and then also, do you have any criteria of what parts of cities or outside of cities or anything like that you target for lots that you want to buy?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I actually very intentionally try not to buy in cities. What I found, I was doing that in the beginning, but what I found was that a lot of the lots that were in a big city were actually in like the ghetto of town, like places where nobody wants to be. Basically just like a old junker house that was torn down. There's just a vacant lot there. And those, in my experience, those have never been the kind of property to buy, simply because who is going to invest the money to build a new home there? It's just not what people are thinking. So the places that I target are in the counties surrounding those big cities. because those places are, about an hour, 2 hour drive from where most people live, and it's far enough away to sort of be away from the hustle and bustle and that kind of thing. So they just look really good to a lot of people who want to buy that kind of, vacation property or whatever you want to call it. And a lot of times those properties have sort of like a beauty factor to it, just because there is
Mm.
wilderness and nature around it and that kind of thing. And so, I mean, there may be a more effective way to get it in the city, but because of the experiences I've had, I've just kind of said, forget that. I'm just doing stuff in the outskirts now.
Yeah, that's smart. I like that. What do you have any criteria for whether or not there's utilities at the property if you're buying like that? And then maybe lot size as well?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a few different utilities to worry about. I mean, there's the like electricity, there's septic, there's all these different things. That is something I usually try to get a good feel for. And it's not I think the only issue that I've even come close to encountering was like, when it comes to perk tests, like seeing if, land can handle a septic system. Because a lot of times there's not like a city sewer in these areas. So in order to, know for sure that it's going to be able to handle that, you got to do a perk test. And I don't know if you've ever been through that process, but you basically have to like dig a hole in the ground and put water in it and test how quickly the water drains. It's kind of a hassle, honestly. It takes time, and there's always a cost to it. But other than that, it's pretty simple to figure out, if electricity is available, if phone, cable, and all those things are available. You just can call your local utility company. And in most places, you can, drill for a well, and that's not generally a problem. So, yeah, and in terms of size, I'm mainly there are the occasional properties out there that like are, for whatever reason, I don't even know why they exist. They're like these tiny little sliver lots that you can't fit anything onto. They were just kind of like leftovers that the people didn't know what to do with when they were designing the property lines.
Huh.
They're not, I mean, there's not a ton of them, but you do encounter them from time to time. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm usually looking at a parcel map before I'm making offers on this stuff, just so I know, okay, this is a legitimate property that is actually useful for something.
Yeah, you
um,
gotta make sure you have access to it too, right?
yeah. Yeah. And actually, surprisingly, I've bought several landlocked properties, and they sell okay. Like they're, which is weird to me because when you can't access it, I don't know how that's even usable. But on a number of occasions, I've been able to buy these big, 5 acre chunks of land that didn't have access, and because of that, I was able to make like a very, very, very low offer, like $150 for 5 acres.
Wow.
And on the back end of selling it, again, I think a lot of land buyers, I don't know why, but they're not necessarily thinking logically like, what can I do with this tomorrow? It's more of just like the dream of property ownership. Like I want to
Hmm.
own land, and that checks the box for them, even if it's really hard or impossible to get to it. They still just want to own that land. And I'm not hiding that fact in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I usually
And
say,
there's ways to get to it, right? I mean, you can, if the neighbor is willing to give you, and sometimes there's even sort of like a recorded right of way,
yeah. Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's something you can find out, through, the title search and that kind of thing. And in some jurisdictions, um, there's actually a few in my state where you can't do this, but in some, the local municipality, I'm told, can even force a neighboring property owner to make way for that because they
Wow.
don't want just these useless pieces of property out there. So,
Yeah, they want to get more tax revenue from it.
yeah, absolutely. So depending on where you're at, that may be an option too.
Well, cool. And what's the biggest size of land for a single purchase you think you've made?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest one that I've done. Well, there was actually, I'll tell you about two of them. This first one, it actually closed. It went through and everything. It was a big 12-acre parcel right on Lake Huron in northern Michigan, and had like 500 feet of beach frontage. And I was able to get
Wow.
that for $4,500, and I sold it a few months later for 45,000. And I probably could have gotten a lot more than that if I had been willing to just hang on to it for a few years, because this was 2011 when this happened. I mean, things were about as bad as they were ever going to get. But that was a pretty good deal. There was another one that I was actually looking at in New Jersey with a friend of mine who also does this, and this property was it was in Hudson County, so like right outside of New York City, and like no joke, the value on this property was like $500,000, and we got a signed contract from the seller to sell it for 27,000. So I mean, this would have been a huge deal, but the deal ended up falling through because, not surprisingly, he just tried a little bit and found somebody who was willing to pay him $100,000 for it. So,
Oh wow.
but I mean, it was like, oh, almost, and it kind of just goes to show you like the level of stuff there is out there. If you're searching for this kind of thing, like there are these huge grand slam deals to be had, and you will come across them if you're doing this long enough. So,
Yeah, that's one of the fun things. You never know what's going to happen. Like you could be having, a rough week where you're not getting any calls and you're thinking, "Oh man, this is tough." And then all of a sudden you get one call, the super motivated seller with a hot property willing to just unload it.
yeah, yeah, I
And
know.
then it'll make your month or even 2 months, so
Yeah,
but yeah, that's awesome. What we wanted to share also, we talked before the show, where there's so many things that we love about the real estate investing business, and then there's some things that we also, I don't know if we use the word hate, it's sort of a strong word, maybe dislike,
yeah, yep.
for some of these things, but let's go ahead and talk about those things that we came up with. So if you want to maybe share the three things that you love about real estate investing in general.
Yeah. Well, I guess in no particular order. I think the first thrill that I ever got when I started doing land investing was when I got my first accepted offer. Just like when it kind of hit me, like, oh my word, like this is real. There are actually people out there who will sell their property for like almost nothing. It blew my mind, and it was kind of just this big light bulb moment, and it sort of still is every time I get one of these. It's just like, man, this is so awesome that I found this opportunity, and just sort of the realization that this stuff is all over the place, like it's everywhere. You just have to be looking in the right places and looking where most people aren't looking. So I don't know,
Yeah.
what's something that you love about your business?
Well, I think the first thing that came to mind is the freedom to do what I want when I want.
Yeah,
With the job, it's like I've got to get up in the morning, Monday through Friday, be there at a certain time,
yeah,
and take my lunch and make sure I get back from lunch at a certain time so I don't get in trouble,
sure.
and all of that, and then wait until you build up enough time for vacation, and that just drove me absolutely nuts. So going full time into real estate investing and just being able to take time off in the middle of the day to say, hey, I'm going to go watch a movie.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do it all the time. We probably work more than we did at the job, but man, just knowing that you can do that whenever you want, that's what I love.
Yeah, man, that is huge. I completely understand that. I actually I saw this quote from, I think it was Eisenhower, and I'm totally going to get this wrong, but basically what he was saying was that, if you want security, then go to prison, because there you're going to be, clothed, fed. I mean, everything you need is going to be there. But the only thing you're not going to have is freedom. and it kind of made me realize, like, man, there's a lot of truth to that. Like, security and freedom can be very, very different from each other. And I think in a lot of ways, both of them sound very appealing, but you sort of have to like pick or choose at some point.
No, I agree completely. And that kind of equates a job with prison, doesn't it?
Yeah, sort of does. Yeah,
Because it gives
I
you,
mean,
the security and everything else. But
yeah,
not that all jobs are bad, but, if you want freedom, it's sort of up to you to go out there and get it
yeah,
for yourself.
absolutely.
So what's the next thing of
Yeah.
the three?
For me, my next one was like with the passive income aspect of it. Just I don't know. I think a lot of people, passive income is kind of like this holy grail, like this amazing thing to, to try to get in life. And I think it is too, but it's kind of hard. Like there's not always easy ways to do that. But I mean, with, the land contracts and with the rental properties that I have, and just, every time I get to see a check or a direct deposit show up, And it's like, man, I did like almost nothing for that this month. That just sort of happened all on its own. And granted, I did plenty of work to set those up in the first place, but just that whole idea of this is just going to keep coming, for the next several years or indefinitely. That's a
Yeah,
really cool
absolutely.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that too. And I think that's for everybody to think, if you want to get into flipping houses and you think, well, I'm just going to flip houses, you're going to get to the point where you're going to say, you know what, I need to start having passive income. I need to start getting rental properties and things like that so that I do some work now and it pays me for a really long time.
Hmm.
And then you build equity, and that's really the true way to building a fortune, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I think my second thing that I wrote down for the what I love about the business is pretty similar to that. So it's the large paydays and sort of the thrill of the chase of getting deals.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
You know,
huge.
so yeah, whenever you get, you close. I mean, sometimes you do so many of them over time, and you sort of get to the point where, you close, and it doesn't even hit you. That like you maybe made 40,000 on a flip. And
Yeah.
you like. You say, okay, what do we gotta go home and do, or what's next?
Hmm.
It's like it's not even.
Yeah.
But the first time you get that, you're going nuts. Even probably the first 10 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's actually my third one too, is just the thrill of closing a huge sale. And it's funny you say that. I remember, when I sold that big one up by Lake Huron, I remember just driving home with a $45,000 check in my car. And like, I was sort of surprised at like how it wasn't like I was, levitating and just, it was just kind of like,
yeah,
yeah, that's okay. What's next? And
yeah, we got to find
I,
the next deal already, right?
yeah, and I think in time I've kind of reflected back on that, and man, that's just amazing. But yeah, just it's really cool how you can, in one fell swoop make more from one deal than you could in an entire year from a day job. Like that's just an amazing thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's just a matter of making that consistent, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So what's the third one you've got there for the what you love about real estate investing?
That actually was my third one. My
Oh, okay.
wasn't the huge sale. We can
All
talk
right.
about more if
Well,
you want to.
yeah, no, it's fine. I'll go on to the third one I had. So the other thing that I really like about the business is working with my wife. So I'm gonna get some
Yeah.
points for that. No, but I really do. That's one of the things I really am glad that we have that sort of passion together. For
Sure.
the same thing. A lot of times people have their own interest and go sort of separate ways with those things, but we have this thing that we're both passionate about, so it's really awesome.
That's very cool. Do you guys do you each specialize in a particular aspect of the business, or like what do you do and what does she do?
Yeah, so I basically do marketing and go to the houses, make offers, buy the houses, help with handling the rehab, and then she does a design for rehab and then staging, um, and then helping with the whole sell of it.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So I start with the first half, and she kind of does the second half, and then we have people that help us too with within the business too with a lot of the aspects. But for the most part, that's how it goes. And then she handles a lot of the bookkeeping, which she doesn't really enjoy all that much. But we're looking for somebody to take that off of her.
Sure. Yeah, that's actually something my wife does too. She's a CPA by trade, and man, that's like exactly where I'm not.
Yeah.
I can do it, but I just don't love it. It's not my passion, and it's awesome to have her there to help with that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it'd be a mess if I did it, right?
Could be. I don't know.
No, but so what are the things that you maybe dislike about the business? Because it's not all pie in the sky awesome stuff. There's some things that are a little bit difficult to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say this is probably more because of like an internal issue in my head, but um, I think you might use realtors or other people to sell and list your properties. Personally, especially in the beginning, a lot of the properties I sold were pretty inexpensive, not big dollar amount deals, but whenever I'm trying to sell a property and I, put a lot of work into creating a listing and getting good pictures and promoting it like crazy. And when I do that and then like the phone doesn't ring, like a week goes by, 2 weeks go by. And I mean, I've never had it where the property didn't eventually sell and I made good money on it for the most part. But, when you wait a couple weeks and nothing happens, a little part of me always starts to just sort of panic, like, oh my gosh, like what did I do? How did I screw this up? And it's just kind of funny, like it's like no amount of experience will give me enough comfort to make me not worry. It's almost, I don't know. I wish I could just get more confident and get over that, but when
Yeah, I don't know if the worry ever goes completely away because we're all taking some risk here. It's limited risk, but we all still take risk.
yeah,
When
yeah, I know it's yeah, I wish there was a way to just be totally comfortable with that, but it's something I'll probably always have to wrestle with.
yeah, it keeps you sharp though.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it keeps you. After 2 weeks, not much happening. I bet you don't just sit there and worry. You probably start to do other things and say, "I got to push this harder. I got to find
Yeah.
a way to move it right."
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, I mean, that's where a lot of my just improvement as an investor has come from is, it kind of lights a fire under you. And it's like, okay, figure something out. Like think of a solution here. And I mean, the good news is there's all kinds of stuff you can do to improve that kind of situation. I mean, tons of stuff. You can improve the listing, you can change the price, you can offer different terms. I mean, there's just a lot of things. And that's one of the nice things I love about real estate is that it's not a black and white thing. There's a lot of things you can do to play with it and make it look more appealing to people.
Yeah, absolutely. You find out maybe from some people that looked at it and said that they didn't want it. Ask them why they didn't want it. Maybe it's not
Yeah.
something that you've thought of, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the first thing that I wrote, which sounds funny when I just say it like this, I think, but fleas, just fleas.
And you're talking
Like when
about
you
like
look at,
literal fleas, right? Like the bugs?
yeah, right, the bugs.
Okay.
So here in Texas, I don't know. I don't know if this is as bad in most places. I would assume it would be, but sometimes in these vacant houses, if the people that lived there before had an animal that had fleas, they don't seem to have a whole lot of them while they lived there. But as soon as people vacate a house
Mm-hmm.
and there were some fleas, like they multiply like crazy. I had one case where I just walked down the driveway next to the house
Mm-hmm.
and was maybe there for 30 seconds. And I looked down and I swear my jeans were black.
What? Are you serious?
Thousands and thousands of fleas on me. It was
Oh
insane.
my gosh. I didn't realize
yeah.
it could get that bad. That's crazy.
It gets bad. And that was just on the driveway, and I didn't even go inside the house. I was too afraid to,
Seriously?
but,
Whoa.
but,
Now, is this
yeah. And so,
is this anything like bed bugs? Is it a similar thing or is it totally different than that?
yeah, I think it's totally different. I mean, they'll bite you and everything. And yeah, I mean, it's not, I don't know. I don't really know much about bed bugs, so I couldn't, but it's not like an infestation thing. I don't think if obviously I knocked them all off of me.
Mm-hmm.
But if I left one on me, I wouldn't take it home and they would multiply. It wouldn't work like that.
Okay. Well, that's good.
But I still always worry about it, though. I'll do my dance out in the middle of the street for about 30 minutes, like patting everything down. And
I'd pay good money to see that.
yeah, no, I've done it a lot of times. But yeah, so anyway, carry some off with you maybe and spray like your pant legs and stuff.
So
But
are they living in the carpet or something or like,
yeah. I mean, typically it's mostly during the summertime. And so we have 10 months of summer here
Okay.
in San Antonio.
yeah.
But
Huh.
yeah, so yeah, you walk in and just it's a habit to look down at your jeans to see if there's a flea on you or not. But
So, I mean, is it like difficult to get rid of those if you were to buy one of those houses? You just,
oh no, not really. No, you just you get some Raid fogger or something like that
mm-hmm.
and set them off in the house. And it's really I'm making it sound like it's every house that has it, but it's probably like 1 in 20 houses that has a bad flea
Okay.
problem that's been vacant for a while.
Yeah, I've never heard of that up here in Michigan. I'm sure it probably happens, but maybe it's like the cold weather or something that kills them off. I have heard of the bed bug thing, but not the fleas. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, yes, that's mine. So what else you got on the dislike column?
Yeah, I think another thing that has always sort of bothered me, and this is part of why I started getting into rental properties and other things, but is not knowing when the next deal is going to come and how big it's going to be. And similar to the whole issue of not knowing if a property is going to sell, like, I don't know why I get so worried about it because, like, I got plenty of leads coming at the door. Like, the opportunity is always there. But just, like, the uncertainty of it, like, just, I don't know. I mean, I hope it works out next month, and it always does, but just, like, I don't know. The uncertainty factor bothers me. So...
Yeah, and so do you think that maybe help to motivate you a little bit to do some of the longer term stuff, the owner financing and things like that, to help maybe cushion that to where you have monthly income coming in? Or
Yeah, absolutely. It has. And it's kind of, I mean, in the end, that's kind of where I want to be anyway, is having like several very different sources of income in my life so that if I ever pull the plug on any one of them, it's okay because I've got a bunch of other ones that are not at all contingent on the one that just died, kind of thing.
yeah, right.
And it's so yeah, I mean, from that standpoint, it's sort of made me put together a pretty solid game plan from that standpoint. But it's like when you're pursuing a business and you want it to grow, and especially if you're like living off that, it just kind of is bothersome to not know what tomorrow's going to look like.
Yeah, I try to use that as reason to always stay on top of the business. Like you always have to continue marketing. You can't stop.
Hmm.
You might get 3 good deals and you're busy doing rehabs and stuff like that, but you still can't stop marketing. You've got to keep doing it.
Yeah, I am curious, like from somebody like yourself who's been doing this full time for a while now, like have you ever had like a dry spell where you went like just months and nothing was happening, or has that never
Oh,
really happened?
absolutely. Yeah, no, that actually just recently happened.
Okay.
Um,
How do you handle that?
Throughout the beginning of this year, we went many months without any deals.
Wow.
And yeah, and so it's just a matter of, doing more marketing. And, I say no deals, but I think that's more of like no rehabs. I think we did some wholesales and got some money from bird dogging and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But, what it boiled down to for me, though, was I started getting the wrong mindset. We always talk about mindset, having the right mindset on the blogs and everything.
Hmm.
And I think some people brush that off just saying, oh, well, you know, people that are already in the business doing well always talk about having the mindset, right? But even after being in the business for over, 12 years now, I even didn't even realize that I was starting to get the wrong mindset. I was starting to talk a lot about how bad the competition had gotten. There's so much competition, and they're paying ridiculous amounts for deals, so I can't get any deals. And I found myself saying that, and I couldn't believe that I was even doing it, not even realizing it. And I had a conversation with my father, who also flips houses, and something just clicked. He told me something, and it made me realize that I had been thinking the wrong way. And so all of a sudden I was like, maybe it is just all in my head, And so as soon as I had that realization, I had not yet done more marketing. I hadn't done anything really differently except for have that epiphany or that realization that I was thinking negatively about deals. That within the next week and a half, I think it was, I got 3 houses under contract.
Wow. It is actually it's really funny how that works. I'm back to my previous dislike about, when I list something and it just kind of sits there forever. I've seen this like so many times, and I don't know why it works this way, but like I'll have a property sitting out there and it's just crickets, nothing's happening. And then like out of nowhere, I'll get like 4 calls in a day on it and everybody wants it. And there's like this bidding war. And it's like, where were you people like 2 months
Yeah,
ago?
that's awesome.
I mean, and I'm always thankful when that happens, but it's just really weird. Like patience.
You attract it, right? Like
yeah,
if you have the right mindset, you sort of attract those things to happen.
yeah, I don't know the mechanics of how or why it works, but it always seems to in the end. And it's just a matter of, I guess, being patient and, being faithful to a process that works and just continuing to believe in that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let me see, where were we? I think it was my turn on the dislike column. So I'm going to say contractors, not all contractors, just bad contractors.
Okay.
And what I mean by bad contractors are ones that aren't responsible and don't do good work.
Mm-hmm.
And, typically when looking back on rehabs and when the flipping business wasn't going well and when I was super stressed out and, every day seemed to be a problem, it almost always boiled down to my mistake of hiring the wrong contractor. Almost every single time.
Now, is this like the general contractor overseeing everything,
Right.
or is this like a
Right,
subcontractor
right.
doing one job?
Right, general contractor.
Okay.
So typically we hire a general contractor to handle the whole rehab,
Sure.
and we have subs that we sort of, have go over to do HVAC and electrical and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time it's mostly the GC, and that's who I'm mostly referring to. When we've had maybe even a good contractor that started doing bad. And what I mean by bad is not, and early on we had this problem where a contractor would not be at a job for a week. And you're going over there saying, what the heck is going on here? Or there's like one guy working real slow, it's like, where's everybody at? It's like a ghost town.
Yeah.
Well, when I was new in the business, I didn't realize it was my fault. First, for hiring that contractor. Second, because I paid them too much too soon.
Oh, I see.
So it's like typically if they're not there, it's because you probably paid them too much too soon. Now they're going to work another job where they're going to get money too.
Sure.
But
that makes sense.
Yeah, and take care of that with contracts. So make sure the contract has a deadline when they need to finish it, and then you have a penalty for every day that goes over that it's not done by that deadline. And that'll solve that most of the time.
Those are really good ideas. I've actually thought about, using this land investing strategy with the delinquent tax list to get, some actual houses in my general vicinity. And, that would probably involve some element of getting a general contractor and getting them to get in there and fix the place up. And that's actually something I've been thinking a lot more about. And it's just something I've never really had to deal with in the land business, but it's a lot more relevant when you're talking about a dwelling of some kind.
Oh, right.
So,
yeah.
but that's really good stuff for me to just keep in mind if and when I get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the whole thing about hire slow and fire fast, right? So you take the time to interview as many contractors as you can and find the right one, based on references from other investors and things like that. Never just like hurry and try to get somebody on that job right away, no matter who it is. Take the time, and then if you find that things aren't working out, get rid of them as soon as possible.
Okay.
But anyway, and so what do you got next on the?
Oh yeah, I'd say my next one, something that I've never really gotten good at this, but some things in my business are just like really, really time consuming. They just take way more of my time than they should. And like, for example, doing some property research, handling closings or creating listings and figuring out market values of properties, and just there's a lot of things that they just suck so much time out of my life. And it's like, man, how do I offload this stuff? And I know the whole, everything that's been said about hiring a VA and all that stuff. And that's honestly something I probably should have pursued a lot harder prior to now. But I don't know. It's something that, like, it takes some real education to do a lot of this stuff. Like, you can't just find anybody in the Philippines and say, hey, do this. Like, it takes a lot of sort of training to do that. And I just never really found a good solution to that. And I'm sure it's completely my fault. It's just something that I don't do well, and it hurts sometimes. Like, time is not a luxury I really have right now in my life. I just have a lot of things going on, and it's hard to juggle all that, especially when things just take up so much of my my time. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I think we're probably the same in that it's pretty hard to let go of some of the tasks that we do. I did order a book, and I haven't started reading it yet because I'm reading like 3 other books already. Sure. But it's sitting on my nightstand, and I plan to read it. But I got this for that exact reason, and maybe you should check it out too. It's called Virtual Freedom.
Yeah, I actually got that audiobook and listened to the whole thing. It's really good. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
Okay, good, because I haven't read it yet, so hopefully it is.
Yeah,
I know it's a couple years old, I think, but it shouldn't matter.
Yeah, and I maybe I just was missing something, but that book, it seemed to apply a lot to like online type businesses, which we both have some of that going on. So it is totally applicable there. When it comes to the real estate stuff, I think there's a lot of that can be done virtually, but it's sort of like you got to hire a VA who's good at a specific thing. Like, any one virtual assistant is not going to be good at all of it. You kind of have to pick them based on their expertise and where you need the most help. And anyway, you can read the book. There's a lot of that stuff in there, but yeah, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it once you're done with it, though, just to see if you can think of any solutions that came up just through getting through that.
Yeah, Maybe we should start a book club too. I think that'd be a good idea.
Maybe.
To share books back and forth. And I love reading books. I don't know about you, but I've always got a big stack of them next to my bed. But
Yeah.
all right. So the third one for me is dishonest investors, and I'll just make this quick because we're already, running a little bit long here. But dishonest investors, and this is something just to be aware for some of the newer people out there, because anytime you've got a business where there's chances to make a good amount of money on something, you're going to have people that do things unethically. And, you'll think maybe if you're used to always everybody sort of being honest and on the up and up, you just have to watch out sometimes for people that aren't. And what I mean by that is the experiences is just like mostly, I've had a couple things happen just where people were sort of like on a wholesale deal where they try to go behind your back and work a deal with the seller and stuff like that. But it's also things that I've heard from other people, where, maybe somebody was doing a short sale on a property and they wholesaled the deal, and then the guy that was going to buy, the investor was going to buy from the other investor, without telling him, decided to try to do a short sale.
Oh.
And I don't know how they were working all this stuff out. It was really weird. But anyway, the part of it that really got me was when they, this investor that got burned told me that, it didn't work out, and so they didn't buy it, and they kept stringing him on, and the seller on, more importantly. The seller ended up losing the house to foreclosure, all because of this other investor tried to do something he couldn't do, and then didn't feel it was important to get out of the way so that the seller could do something else with the house.
Yeah.
It's like they could just care less that they went to foreclosure and lost the house.
Jeez.
So yeah, but anyway, that's one of the things I don't like about
that's
the business
I
teams.
totally get that. It's for me, it's a lot of the people I sell to. They're not even really investors necessarily. They're just kind of like people who want land. A lot of people are just flaky. Like it really bothers me. Like they just don't care. They'll string you along and make you think they're gonna want to buy something, and they're really just kicking the tire. And it's very bothersome to deal with that. And I think there are probably some ways you can manage that, but in a lot of ways, that's just kind of comes with the territory in this business. At least it seems like it does.
Right. So yeah, it's just to know that it's there,
Yeah.
and to sort of recognize when something is not going the way it's supposed to, and trying to nip it in the bud and take care of it before it becomes a problem.
Mhm.
But we covered a lot of ground in this episode, and it's really awesome. I really liked talking a lot about a lot of the land stuff, because it's not a normal thing that a lot of people have heard about, including myself. So I've got some awesome notes here from this, and I'll share them on the show notes page, which will be on flippingjunkie.com/podcast/Seth Williams, SethWilliams, flippingjunkie.com/podcast/Seth Williams. And Seth, you have, I usually ask if people have a book that they like to recommend to anybody listening, anything that you maybe read recently that you enjoyed.
Yeah. I'm going to pull up my Audible app here and just see what I've got. Do you ever do audiobooks, or mostly just reading them the old-fashioned way?
I don't. I listen to podcasts while I'm driving around and stuff like that.
Okay. One that I read not long ago was one called Getting Past No by William Ury, or U-R-Y is how you spell his last name. I don't know how you pronounce that. But it's really just a book about sort of like negotiation, and how do you get past no? When you hear the word no, is it the end of the conversation, or are there things you can do to kind of get past that? And a lot of the stuff I found was actually fairly intuitive. It's not like, oh, I never thought of that. It's just, but the same coin, it's like you really don't think about it in the heat of the moment when you hear no, and you're just kind of like upset and not happy about it. But if you can kind of follow, the process he lays out, and just kind of think of ways to get around that, it's pretty helpful. So,
cool. Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. I'm going to have to check that out.
What about you? Anything else?
Let me see. What, book-wise?
Yeah. Anything good you're currently reading or just read?
Yeah, right now I'm actually reading Miracle Morning.
Okay. What's that about?
And Hal Elrod, and that's That's about a morning ritual, and I just started it too. So it's basically about having a morning ritual to get your mind right and everything, and to his story is pretty incredible because he I guess when he was around 20 years old, I think it was, he was a salesperson and was selling a lot and doing really well in the company he was in and stuff, and then he had a car accident, hit head on, and actually died for 6 minutes.
Whoa.
And then brought back to life and had permanent brain damage and broken 20-something bones or something like that. And instead of just, thinking of where he was and, having a pity party, he thought, I'm going to use this to my advantage. I'm going to, from now on, make sure that I make the most out of everything, and just turned it into a positive. And so anyway, I mean, it just goes into some cool things, and heard that on another podcast, Justin Williams podcast, that he interviewed him, and so I saw that on there and got the book and started reading it. It sounds like a pretty cool thing. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I could use a better morning ritual than the one I currently have. I just kind of flop onto the floor and, groan for a while and get up and kick the dog and take a hot shower. Maybe I could change that around a little bit.
Yeah, it sounds like you probably could benefit from a little change there, but so let's see here. Is there a way that everybody out there can reach you? Yeah,
I mean, really, probably the best place is just to check out the blog, which you mentioned earlier, retipster.com. I'm also, on all the major social media outlets like Facebook and Twitter and G+, all that stuff. So, yeah, feel free to check out the blog or reach out to me in one of those spots, too.
All right, cool. And then we'll have the links also that we talked about on the show notes page on flippingjunkie.com/podcast/Seth Williams, including the postcard example that he talked about during the show. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks a lot again, Seth.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on. It was really fun talking to you, and maybe we can do it again sometime.
Cool. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
Well, thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you got a lot out of it. I know I enjoyed interviewing Seth and everything he shared. I want to take a minute just to ask you what you're struggling with. I want to be able to provide specific information on each episode that covers exactly what you want to hear. And you can do that by simply going to facebook.com/flippingjunkie. And junkie is Junkie. So facebook.com/flippingjunkie, and once you're there, you can leave a message for me containing what exactly has been holding you back, and any other questions that you might have about flipping houses. And what I'll do is I'll make a list of those things and make episodes to cover each of those topics that you guys are struggling with or want to find out more about. So please be sure to go to facebook.com/flippingjunkie to do that. And also visit flippingjunkie.com/9, the number 9, for today's show notes and to get the postcard that Seth uses to generate leads and has been nice enough to share with us. You can get that at flippingjunkie.com/9. Thanks a lot for listening, and I'll see you next time.